Hello, and welcome to the Pillar Diaries, episode number 14, featuring Sister Cyndi Bounds. Sister Cyndi was born and raised in the hills of West Virginia. She graduated from West Virginia University as a registered dental hygienist. Her and her husband, Brother Aaron Bounds, just celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. They live in Zanesville, Ohio, where they pastor the Anchor Church. They have 7 daughter works and 2 international campuses, one in Guatemala and the other in Vietnam. She is a Bible quizzing coach, not to mention that her team is national winners. Sister Bounds teaches high school English and Spanish at the Anchor Christian Academy. She states, "My children are my greatest accomplishment." Laken is 18 and attends Ohio University. Sawyer is 16, Jillian is 14, and Finn is 10, and they all attend the Anchor Christian Academy. Sister Bounds' story shows the power of just a little bit of influence. We all sometimes think we know what's best for our lives and fail to seek what God says about it. But the other thing her story shows is the unwavering love of a father. He will do whatever it takes to bring us back home, even if it brings us low, only to bring us to our knees and back to Him. He will leave the 99 to go find the one that he has lost to bring them home. Let her story challenge and change you. These women are our pillars, and their stories are our monuments. If we ever fail to tell their stories, what they have built will crumble. These are their diaries.
I'm Cyndi Bounds, and I live with my husband Aaron and our 4 children in Zanesville, Ohio. And we've lived there for 18 years now. And you know, I've loved Jesus for as long as I can remember. I've always loved God. But I haven't always known that I needed Him. I grew up in the church. I was raised apostolic by my parents. That's all I ever knew. And I went to public school, and it was fine. I was doing great. I loved it and had no problems. We moved away when I was a little older, going into middle school, and we started going to a private school. Now, this is probably where confusion first began. It was a non-denominational school, and so I had my friends at school, and I had my friends at church, and they were all Christian to whatever the best of their ability of what they had been taught. And so as I began to get older, wanted to hang out and do things with my friends, I remember getting confused. I remember my friends at school were really good people. They were great. They would say, "Well, let me pray about that with you. And let's meet together and let's do this. Let's study the Bible together." And it was neat. But I remember thinking, wow, they really have a lot of Christ-like attributions. And at the same time, my youth group at church was struggling. They were struggling. And I saw, as we all do, but I know that now, but what I didn't know then, as a younger child, some hypocrisy in the church. And I began to compare it with my friends at school. And I really began to get confused. When I was growing up, getting older, involved in the church, still had not really had a need for God. I was involved, I Bible quizzed, and I was in the choir, outreach. I mean, if there was window cleaning night at the church, we were there. Our family, we were faithful, we were at everything. And I know now what I didn't know then. I was just really ignorant. I studied the scriptures, but not with prayer entwined with it. I was studying to compete, and I wasn't studying for understanding. I realize that now. You have to be very careful with that. I was studying to compete, and so I realize now what I didn't know then is I didn't really have a relationship with God. I was living for God, but I wasn't living with God. And it progressed. I got older, and it's time for college. And non-prayerfully, I moved away, 3 hours away, to a secular university. And that's tough for any 18-year-old to do. I'm not a big fan of it. You have to really be solid in your faith to do that, to move that far away from accountability. And I was not. I was confused. And I moved away with very little accountability. 3.5 hours from home at the secular university. And I already had all these questions going on in my mind. Now, at the same time, or previous to this, my current husband was a lifelong friend. We were always friends. And he was the first guy I ever went on a date with when I was 17. And I thought a lot of Aaron Bounds. In fact, I wrote in my diary when I was 14, one day I'm gonna marry Aaron Bounds. But then as I got older, I knew his walk with God was pure. I knew it was right, I knew it was true, I knew those things. But I had decided I was unsure that I wanted to live that way because I had my own questions, my own doubts. So I was not sure that I wanted to be with Aaron Bounds anymore as I got older. At the same time, Aaron had prayed a prayer. He said, God, if Cyndi Tackett is the girl I'm supposed to marry, let me fall head over heels in love with her. This was our freshman year of college. He was away at another university, and he did. He fell in love with me. And so he called to talk to me about it. I was 18 years old, and I was honored and flattered, but I thought long and hard about it, and I made a decision. A lot of things come down to just making a decision, and I made a wrong decision. I decided I did not want to be apostolic. I wanted to be a Christian, but I didn't want to define it the way that I felt like it had been defined my whole life. I wanted to make my own definitions of what I thought a godly woman should be. And I'd seen great examples of godly women, but because of the confusion that had set in, I began to pray less. Always when you make a decision, you have to do it prayerfully. I know that now. At the time, I lacked prayer life. I would pray at church, but I did not have that relationship with God that I needed. And I decided I wanted to do my own thing. And I wrote Aaron a long letter, and he still has it to this day. I wrote him a letter in 1996, and I told him I respected him, and I knew God had called him to the ministry, and I had great respect for that. And I thought he was going to do great things for God, but that I was not walking in the same direction that he was. And I felt it best that we go our separate ways. He said when he got that letter, he was devastated because he thought, God, you let me fall in love with her after I prayed that. And then I get this letter. He was confused, but he made up his mind that he was going to pray for me every day. And he did. He prayed for me every day for 3 years. And I'm so thankful for that. But there were a lot of people praying for me as I began to make the wrong decisions. But this time in my life, so I went through my freshman year of college, and then my sophomore year of college. And you know, something I didn't say previously is I was prophesied over by a minister's wife at a younger age that I already knew I was called to ministry. I knew that, but I was prophesied over about being a leader and a pastor's wife. And I wasn't real sure about that. And so I had decided that wasn't for me. So I made my own decisions, and I decided I wanted to go to dental school. So after I finished my sophomore year of college, I began to make friendships and date and just going down the wrong direction. Just wasn't where I needed to be with God. And again, up until this point in my life, I just didn't understand that I needed God. I thought I could do it on my own. I was going to church, and I feel like it's almost a more dangerous place to be in because I began to justify what I did. I didn't just walk away from God. I walked in a different direction that I still thought was toward God. But I thought it was going to be, like I said, by what I thought that God wanted for me with my own studying instead of doing it through Him. And I started going to a church that was in walking distance. I did not have a car at college, so that was difficult. And I didn't have transportation to get to the apostolic church. That was difficult. And so I started going to a church I could walk to. And little by little, I just began to let this thing go and let that thing go and justify it that these people were good Christians. I didn't realize that boundaries were keeping me safe. I thought they were keeping me from things that I could experience. I didn't realize they were really just guardrails keeping me safe. And the more I would let them down, the more of a stronger turn the other way I would go, until I almost didn't recognize who I was 2 years into it. I thought, wow, I've really chosen a different path, and I wasn't happy with it. And I knew that deep down. And I had prayed, God, I want to be in your will. And when I was a little girl, I remember singing a song in church, whatever it takes for my will to break, that's what I'll be willing to do. I'll trade sunshine for rain, comfort for pain. And I don't think God hurts us. I don't think it works like that, but I do think he can allow storms to come in our life. And I think I know that he allowed a storm to come into my life in 1998, August the 2nd. I was traveling in a vehicle. I was a passenger with my friend, and I was in a terrible car accident. I had just prayed the week before, God, if I'm not in your will, because it just began to weigh on me, and I knew I wasn't happy. I thought, God, if I'm not in your will, please, please help me find my way to where you want me to be. And I know that God knew I was sincere when I prayed that. And just like the old song says, sin will take you further than you want to go. It'll keep you longer than you want to stay. That's how I felt. I remember going back to an apostolic church and wanting to feel what I had felt as a child. But I felt like I could. I just thought, man, I'm just in a different world now. I can't quite connect like I used to. I just felt like I couldn't. And August 2nd, 1998, I was in a bad car accident. A really bad car accident. My parents were called, and I woke them up early that morning. The driver had fallen asleep at the wheel. We were on a road trip. They were awakened and told, your daughter has been in a bad car accident, and we have her here at Wake Forest University, and she's asking for you, and she's hurt pretty bad, and she's really wanting you, which, I didn't know any of this at the time, but that was a little bit untrue. I was completely unconscious, and they were trying not to get my parents in a panic. They knew it was about a 4-hour drive, and they knew they needed to get to the hospital quick. So my parents took their time going. They had some things to take care of. They just took their time and got down there later on that day. My mom says when she walked into the trauma unit that day, she didn't recognize me. She asked, where's our daughter? They said she was in this room, and they said, well, that's her laying right there. And my mom just fell down. She cried. She couldn't believe because of all the trauma. My face was badly scratched and swollen and black and blue and scabbed and blood everywhere. They hadn't really cleaned me up much. It was wrapped, part of it. And then, of course, they would come to find out the biggest area of concern was my lower right leg. They were quite sure it would need to be amputated from the knee down. Both my legs were broken. Both my feet were broken. Both my ankles were broken, but my right side was crushed. And so I don't want to drag it out too long, but after, just to kind of shorten it a little bit, probably a month's worth of surgeries, 20-some surgeries later, we began to, I was in and out of consciousness for a while. I didn't really know what was going on, but we began to get better understanding. Excuse me. We began to get better understanding of the extent of my injuries. And the doctors had come and met with us and talked to us because there was no feeling on my right side. My nerves were completely severed in my leg. So without your nerves and without feeling, you cannot walk. You can't plant your foot. So they told me I would have the arm crutches and kind of drag my leg behind me for the rest of my life, which was doubly horrifying to me. I was a runner and I ran track, and I just remember thinking, man, if I could remember telling the doctor, every surgery I would go into, I didn't know when I would wake up if my leg would be amputated. I was 20 years old. It was devastating. And I remember telling the doctor, if you have to cut my leg off, please let me die. I don't want to live. I don't want to live without a leg. And I remember him saying, we're going to do everything we can to save it. But I remember when the team met with us and they talked to us about our options, and they said, we think we're going to be able to save her leg, which was awesome, and we're thankful for that. A lot of prayers going up. But they said, however, she'll drag it behind her forever. So we recommend an amputation, because with a prosthetic limb, she'll eventually be able to walk without assistance, maybe even run again one day, get a very minimal limp, and she'll have better function in her life. Which my parents were praying people, as well as all my family. Aaron, great friend to me at the time, and so many people in my life, my pastor and their family, and just the whole district I was from. They all just were praying, and my mom said, no. If you're able to save her leg, we do not want you to amputate it. We're going to believe that God will heal it. And they were like, okay, we're just telling you medically it's not possible for her to walk without assistance because she can't plant her foot ever again. And he was the #2 orthopedic surgeon in the world at that time that was working with me, which is there's so many miracles throughout the whole thing, but that was another miracle, that he was there working with me, because of all places for my accident to have happened. And at that time, Dr. Webb was the best, literally. And I remember them saying, if Dr. Webb can't do it, no one's going to be able to. So I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for how God allowed that to happen. But he did. They were able to save my leg. But that is nowhere near where the miracle stopped, because I was still right where they said I would be, not able to use it. So I remember getting released from the hospital several weeks after being in the hospital, months, and going home by ambulance, several hours home, because my legs were in traction, because literally the whole backside of my right leg was gone. And so it couldn't lay. There were open, exposed nerves. Every time someone would even walk into the room, I would scream in pain. And there was nothing they could do for it, because it's like the worst pain ever is exposed nerves. So I remember my leg being in my right side being in traction the whole ride home. And when I got there, I had to live in our basement where they could fit this hospital bed so that my leg could continue to be in traction. And I had to have a nurse with me. So I was bedridden there for several more months. That was also a traumatic experience, going home, coming off of all of the narcotics I had gotten addicted to in the hospital. And God really helped me through those withdrawals. That was difficult. But I was completely confined to the bed. And I couldn't even get in a wheelchair because of my leg being in traction. And I was depressed. All my friends were away at college. College had started back a few weeks after my accident, so they'd long been gone. My sister was away. That's my only sibling. She was away at college. My mom and dad worked full-time jobs, and I was with this stranger nurse that would come and sit with me. And it was an awful time. It was just an awful time. And I remember I don't even know, it was God visiting me. It was God, probably the prayers saturated in our home. God visited me one day, and I opened my Bible. My mom kept it right there by my hospital bed. I know she was hoping I would pick that up, and I did. I opened my Bible and I began to read. And the scriptures, it's like they were glowing. They were coming alive to me. And I remember reading in Psalms. These were scriptures I could recite from Bible quizzing, but I only recited them robotically before. But when I began to read them, it's like they were illuminated. And I just remember I stopped reading them, and I remember I began to quote them like authoritatively, and I knew them, and I began to pray them over my life, and the presence of God fell on me. God completely refilled me with His Spirit and answered my prayers. And I told Him that day, God, if you'll heal me, I will never question you again. Because And if I can help anybody to understand this, is to not question God. I think I grew up because of the confusion in the school and the youth group saying, well, is this a heaven or hell issue? Do I really have to do this to go to heaven? Instead of understanding it was about a relationship. And my husband's been amazing. We've been married 20 years. He's been amazing teaching me over the years. I feel like I learn more from him every day. But he's been amazing teaching me, and it's a revelation I had, I don't know, probably 15 years ago. I thought, man, I would never have looked at Aaron when we were going to get married and say, please tell me the least amount that I have to do in order for you to stick around with me. How many meals do I have to cook you? How clean does our house have to be in order for you to be happy with me? No, it wasn't like that at all. When I began to fall in love with him, there were certain things I didn't wear only because I knew he didn't like them. He doesn't like me in certain colors. And even though I liked him, I thought I wanted him to like it because I was in love with him. I wanted him to think I looked nice. And it was just revelatory to me. That's what I was doing with God. I was saying, is this a heaven or hell issue? God, do you require this of me to go to heaven? Because if you don't, I'm not going to do it. I'd rather do it my way. And I was doing that with God my whole life. I'll do it if I have to, because I was a good girl. Thank God I had the fear of God and my parents in me when I was backslidden. I didn't get into too much trouble because I would have been scared to death to do too many wrong things. But my heart wasn't right, though. And the biggest thing I've realized is if your heart's not right, nothing else matters. I had to get my heart right first. But when I got my heart right, I literally began to fall in love with Jesus. And when I began to fall in love with him, I was like, how much more can I do? Wonder if he wants me to go above and beyond and do this. Wonder if he'd like me. You know, my husband, when we got married, he wanted to know when I made him spaghetti the first time, I didn't make mashed potatoes with it because I didn't do that growing up. I still think it's kind of gross. But he was like, where's the mashed potatoes? And I said, you don't eat mashed potatoes with spaghetti. He was like, but my mom always made them with spaghetti, and I love that. And I thought, that's disgusting, and I'm not your mom, and I'm not going to do it. And then I realized that was ugly. I love Aaron, and if he wants mashed potatoes with the spaghetti, I'm going to make mashed potatoes with the spaghetti. And that would be above and beyond. It's not just feeding him, it's going extra and making something I think's gross, but he likes. And that's how we will be. We will be that way when we fall in love with Jesus. We will begin to desire the things he has for us. That's another verse that I absolutely love. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. I used to think that verse meant if you're living for God and you're walking with God, he's going to give you whatever you want. If you want to live on a horse farm, he's going to let you have it. If you want a BMW, he's going to bless you with it. And then I thought one day, that's ridiculous. That can't be what that verse means, or we'd all have everything we wanted if we're living for God. And that I look around, that's certainly not happening. And I thought, what does that verse mean? And God showed it to me one time, probably 20 years ago, not long after we were married. We were praying about something, and one of the elders in our lives told us, sometimes the will of God's nothing more than what you want. And I thought, that's absurd. What does he mean? But I realize now exactly what he means, because if you're in the will of God and you're walking with God, he's the one that gave you that desire. Because if you're delighting yourself in the Lord, he gives you those desires of your heart. And that's why Paul said, the things I used to hate, I now love. And the things I used to love, I now hate. Because God changes your desires. So I found myself all of a sudden having desires to do things for God that I never dreamt. Having convictions for myself that I never dreamt. I would have laughed before. I just want to please him. I love him so much. He's been so good to me time and time again. We've been married, like I said, 20 years. After my car accident, there are so many more stories I could tell you, but I really just wanted to share of how God brought me back to Him. It was a moment, but ultimately it was a decision, because God had moved on me before. I had been in so many services and prayer meetings, God moved on me, but I didn't make the decision. And at the end of the day, we have to there's power in a made-up mind. I had to make up my mind. I'm doing it. And it became so easy. My whole life, I thought it was hard to live for God because I questioned everything. But when I got sold out, it's so easy. It's so easy. When you live for God with everything you've got, it's a beautiful thing. And God has truly, truly blessed me so much. And I'm so thankful. I feel so undeserving of His grace and His love, His forgiveness. And sure enough, I'm a pastor's wife. I finally, God changed my desires. I wanted to be a pastor's wife then. I wanted to marry Aaron. And I wanted all those things God had for me the whole time that I was running from. And I'm so, so thankful. If there's something I could tell anybody, any piece of advice, I would say, ask God to give you the desires of your heart. Ask Him to be the one to give them, so that way they're not your desires, they're the desires He wants you to have. I wish I would have learned that at an earlier age, to want to be pleasing to Him and not just trying to do things my way. Probably the most influential person in my life, female-wise, growing up, was my pastor's wife. She was amazing. She is amazing. And her health is starting to fail her now, but I love her very much. And that was actually her favorite verse on 37:4, and I never understood it. I never understood. I thought, why is that her favorite verse? That verse doesn't really make sense. I never really, until God showed it to me later, and now I'm like, I get it. And I love that verse because I have a revelation. There are so many verses in the Bible that mean so much more than face value. But God will help you see them when you're just seeking Him.
What would you say has been the greatest reward of living a life for God?
Oh, my greatest reward of living my life for God, above knowing that I have that relationship with Him, is my family. Having my family walk in truth. And because of the lessons I've learned, I can teach my children the things I didn't understand. Understanding brings favor. I think I grew up, I could probably speak for a lot of people in my generation. It's not that our parents did maybe what their parents did and what their parents did. I didn't have a good understanding of why I did what I did. It was more like, if you don't question what we tell you to do, or you're being disrespectful. And I think that's because that's how they were taught. And so I grew up doing things without understanding them. And then that just becomes rules and not relationship. So my biggest reward are my children, and having an understanding now of the scriptures that I didn't have when I was younger, and being able to have that time of devotion with them every day and talking with them about what it means. And now watching them, my children are winning souls. They're teaching Bible studies. They're praying their friends through to the Holy Ghost. And those are things I never did at their age. And I'm so proud of them. They're doing so much more than I ever did at their age. And I'm so thankful. It is the greatest reward, watching that in your children.
If you could leave one piece of advice to the next generation, what would it be?
If I could leave a piece of advice to the next generation, that's tough. Your elders are a little smarter than you think. They taught me the things I know now, but I would probably tell them prayer. There's no new program under the sun. There's no new event under the sun that's going to make you any closer to God. It just comes down to prayer. If I could have told my young self that, if I could tell the young generation, there's nothing that works better than prayer. It's prayer. If you will pray, and not just talking to God about things you want, but letting God talk to you. If you will get in prayer, God will open your eyes and your relationship with him will grow so deep you will not walk away from God. I did used to struggle, and I still get a little, and I realize people they do it they don't mean bad, but when I'll hear preachers say, I didn't grow up in this, and I'm so blessed to be in this, and I don't understand how anyone could walk away from this. And it kind of, it makes me feel so terrible because I did walk away, but what I have to understand and what they don't understand is I didn't really walk away from this because I didn't have this. I didn't have this understanding when I went the other direction. I've got it now. I didn't have it then. And so I've had to understand they don't realize sometimes the full story of it. I didn't walk away from what I have now. I didn't have this.
Tell me about some other miracles God's done in your life.
Well, he's done so many. He has truly done so many. When I think of some of the other miracles God's done after I began to walk with him and live with him, with daily relationship would be with my children. Some of the miracles he's done with them. I've told this story before when I've spoke. I have 4 children, and I'm so thankful for all of them. And when I was pregnant with my second, Sawyer, the doctors told us that right early on, something was not right. They said he's not developing properly. This pregnancy will probably terminate itself, but if it doesn't, you need to consider doing that because he's going to have abnormalities. We didn't tell anyone. We kept that to ourselves. We didn't even tell anyone I was pregnant. We just began to pray because this was very early on. And when I went back at 14 weeks, we prayed. Aaron and I prayed, fasted, just sought God for peace about the situation and for healing. And when we went back 14 or 15 weeks into the pregnancy, still very early, they said, well, I'm not sure. These ultrasound pictures look completely different. This baby is developing perfectly fine. And I'm so thankful for that miracle. Sawyer, if you don't know him, he's a hoot. He's a funny child, and he brings us a lot of joy. He's very genuine. I'm thankful for that miracle. We praised God. We thanked God. We told people God healed him. People, they said there were abnormalities. Then when I was pregnant with our third one, Jillian, it was seemingly healthy pregnancy. Didn't know a single thing was wrong. And I told my husband I did not feel well one day. I said, something doesn't feel right. And to make a long story short, my water broke at not quite 29 weeks pregnant. And so they rushed me to Ohio State because they said, we can't handle a baby under 30 weeks here in Zanesville. And she's probably the one that my husband talks about the most when he's preaching because was a long process. She was born very early, and she was very sick. They told us she probably wasn't going to make it, not because babies at 28 weeks can't make it, but because she had such a bad infection in her lungs. She had 90% carbon dioxide in her lungs, and her Apgar tests were off. She had like 10% oxygen. They just said, this is not, if she makes it, there's going to be major issues. And so we prayed and we prayed and we prayed. And so then they came to my room and let me know she was probably not going to make it through the night. And my husband wasn't with me, and it was so awful. And anyway, she's perfect. She's 14. And it was a long process, though, because once we knew God healed a hole in her heart, that was an issue. God healed her hearing from being preemie, that was an issue. God healed her vision, just everything they told us, now you need to pray for this. The doctors would say, all right, next thing you need to pray for. He would tell us what we needed to pray for. And we had a word. A prophet called us and said, don't worry, she's going to be perfect. And the day we got to take her home, she was up to 4 pounds, and they said, well, she's perfect. And she is as perfect as she can be. She brings so much joy. She is a giggle box, and she's just the light of our lives. And we prayed and we shouted, and our whole church was thanking God because we were at the NICU for so long. They were bringing us meals, and we were in the Ronald McDonald house. That was and they were all right there with this long process. So we rejoiced over that miracle. And with Finn, my fourth one, well, in between Jillian and Finn, I lost a baby. and I was just entering into my 5th month of pregnancy, so I was pretty far along, and they couldn't find a heartbeat. And so I had to deliver him, and that was Asher, and there was just no explanation. And that was hard. But we praised God through the storm, and then made the tough decision to have another one, tried again. And it was like it was progressively getting worse each time, because I went into labor for Finn at 16 weeks. And so they were able to stop it. But then I went on bed rest for 4 months until I was full term. Now with 3 little ones, that was a challenge. And but God helped us, and I made it full term with Finn. And when my water broke on Pentecost Sunday morning, I went to the hospital to have him, and I had no reason to have a cesarean, and I didn't have any peace. And I told my husband, I don't feel right. I feel like I'm supposed to have a C-section. We prayed about it. That's a really odd thing to feel. I did not want to have a C-section. I'd only had one, and it wasn't fun with children and 3 floors in our house. And I made the decision right then to have a cesarean. And when he was born, the doctor looked at us and said, "Good choice, Mom. He probably would have died if you hadn't had a C-section." But God prompted us for that. And he had a true knot within his cord, and it was cutting off the circulation. And he said the way he was positioned, he would have been in that position for a while, and he would have either died or had severe brain damage. And so we rejoiced and we thanked God for that miracle. And one day when I was praying, thanking God for the miracles of my children, it was like God said, "What about Laken, your oldest?" And of course I'm thankful for her. But I was thanking God for they each had a story about their birth. And I thought, but her birth was easy. It was perfect. It was storybook. There was no real miracle in that story. And it's like God told me, that is the miracle. There was nothing wrong. And if you study births and how many things can go wrong with pregnancies and just abnormalities and things throughout, it's a miracle when there's literally nothing that goes wrong. And I felt like, God told me we don't always thank him for what we expect, because some things we expect. And I expected a healthy birth, and it was healthy, and it was like, oh, yeah, that's great, I'm thankful. But I didn't appreciate it because I expected it. And man, something came over me when and I just started hooping and hollering and praising God. I'm thankful for Laken. I'm thankful for her birth. It was a miracle. And God healed her he kept her from those things. And I feel like that in the church sometimes. We celebrate those backsliders like me. And I'm thankful, and we should. But I'm thankful for the sweet, sweet Sister Mary Williams is at our churches. And I'm thankful for the sweet Sister Betty Hodge, the faithful saints that have been there for years. Sometimes we forget to give God praise and celebrate those faithful pillars because we just expect them to be there. But I'm thankful for the pillars. I'm thankful for the pillars in my life because I don't know where I would be without them. So we need to celebrate in all things that God does.